Rob, it's a delight to have you here in person. It's a delight to have an opportunity to hear you speak. You've been a long-time supporter of the group, and it's really nice to be able to have you there and making a contribution in this way. Thank you for being willing to do it. Inspire us.
Okay, no pressure there. All right, let me make a start, and thank you very much for the invitation. Firstly, all right. So as I said, thanks very much for the invitation, and it rather got me thinking about this and this topic, but I had already thought about it a bit before, and so I guess. The first question is what prompted me to suggest this topic to you? And there were three reasons I could come up with. And the first one was an article in Travelog way back in 2011, which I actually picked up the copy of this at the annual meeting Ludlow, I think, in 2015. And I picked up, and then I saw this page, and there had been a talk about art meets travel, and I thought I do recognise those photos up on the display there, because that was my ARPS panel, but by the time I asked, no one there was aware of whether or what the discussion was about, or whether they simply thought they were brilliant images, or perhaps I should have put them in the visual art section or whatever it was. But anyway, it's still been one of those things where I thought, oh, okay, well, someone's seen a connection between travel and art there. The second one, I notice Peter's with us today online, is an article by Peter Walmsley in Travelog 92, where he talks about travel photography or holiday snaps. And I thought this was a great article, and topics such as what is a travel image, what makes a good travel image, and then he had a table and some discussion about what images that are made versus reactive or snapshot images. So I really have enjoyed that and referred back to it many times. And the third one is the RPS Travel Distinction Guide, which came out in a very long time ago now, but in 2016. And there's a lot of excellent advice on that, and there's certainly an artistry that's obvious in most of the example images. But the guide actually also raised a number of questions, and I'll discuss one of those as we get into this. All right, so first question, what is travel photography? And the Distinction Guide says, amongst other things, that travel photography above all captures a sense of the time and place, a location or an event. And so that's been, I guess, an ongoing general theme about the sense of place in particular has been talked about. Now, Peter, in his Travelog article, mentions that, or quotes someone else who has said, one of my favourite interpretations is that it expresses the essential character and spirit of a location, that is, what makes it special or unique. And then he goes on to say, I propose that for an image to be classified as a travel image, it not only has to capture a sense of place, but those elements are going to be unfamiliar to the photographer. And then paraphrasing, says that the viewer is also outside their home territory. So we've got the idea with this one that, in fact, it's going to be unfamiliar places, and we'll get back to that topic or why that might be important in a little while. So the distinction guide talks about 8 types of images that count as potential travel images: landscapes, seascapes, cityscapes, environmental portraits, doorstep photography, which they describe as photography near your home, people doing things, buildings, and wildlife, which I've, in the right-hand side here, sort of grouped into the main themes of landscapes, seascapes, cityscapes, and street photography. There's people there, but can include contextual portraits, architectural images, and wildlife. So it's a fairly broad theme there. All right, let me just quickly. It's not going to turn into a history lesson, but just briefly talk about the history of travel photography, and only 3 phases I have sort of grouped this into. But the first one was early travel photography, and that was basically about foreign lands, people going off into mysterious places, or it might simply be like a grand tour of Europe, something like that. And so there was an obvious audience for that back home for the people who hadn't been there, and it was of great interest to see something completely different. And this image in Kashgar was taken somewhat late in the theme of early photography, but this was taken in 1935 by Ian's brother, and it's in a book called News from Tartary, an epic journey across Central Asia, which I must say is a great read. And so you can see there the Grand Mosque in Kashgar, and the bazaar, and all the people around that area. And so these days it's somewhat quieter outside the Grand Mosque. Everything's been tidied up and cleaned up somewhat. But it was also interesting to the image on the right here to go and have a look at the building that was the former British consulate in Kashgar. And around the back of this building, which is now a Chinese restaurant, but around the back of it there's a veranda and a valley below it, and to read Peter Fleming's descriptions of infidels taking pot shots at people out on the veranda of the consulate. So great interest there. Right, the second important part really was the democratisation of photography with inventions such as the Kodak camera that made photography easier for everyone. And then that, of course, led us all to slideshows, perhaps, and then more recently with smartphones, that photography, in a sense, or travel photography, or travel while you're away, is somewhat ubiquitous. So this then leads to what I've called the third phase, which is an ongoing phase that is essentially narcissistic. You know, for example, this one I took back when people were still using cameras, quite some time ago. You know, you've climbed up to the top of the dome at St. Peter's in Rome, and what do you take a photo of? The dome, the view? Oh, no, you take a photo of each other. All right. So we're all aware of that. But of course, none of this is art. If we're talking, you know, trying to relate travel photography to art, none of this is art. This historical development of travel photography is all about the faithful recording of people or events. So we're in faithful recording mode in photography, and so here I am being faithfully recorded on a smartphone opposite the Tiger's Nest Monastery in Bhutan a month or so ago. I did actually take some photos as well, but I just reflect on one of the other people, Eric Barat, who was on our group, who at the time was doing a far better effort at creating art with his black and white image of the monastery there. So we've got the two different elements here, and next slide will talk about what that is. So what then is art? So art is always interpretive. We're always when we're trying to, or anyone who's trying to create art is trying to interpret something. They're trying to interpret objects, experiences, performances, and these are designed to get a response. So in this case, with art, you're not in faithful recording mode, you are in interpreting mode. All right. So what this means is that you see what others see, but you see it with your own eyes and your own being, and basically you interpret it. And so that is art. So, in this image here, if you go to Venice, you're not going to stand on the edge of the water and see a whole lot of fuzzy gondolas, are you? The idea is it's an interpretation there to suggest that they're all being rocked to sleep. And so here's the distinction that I think is relevant to travel photography. It's photos that are a record versus photos that are an interpretation. So, and in this slide, we've got a scene. I haven't seen it much lately. It was all the go about 15 or 20 years ago. Everyone taking photos of this place, and I was amused that in England it tended to be called the Belvedere, but when I got there, I realised that was because it was the name of the farm there, which was the farm with the beautiful view, or the Podere Belvedere. But the point of it is, in the lower image, I've done an interpretation there of how I'd like to see it and how I'd like it to be viewed. Whereas on another trip, I actually stopped at the same car park and took the photo in the middle of the day, and it could be anywhere. And there's no real interpretation, it's just a record shot. So, interpretations, what are they? Well, they might be as simple as light, dawn or dusk, rather than a harsh light of day, as per the previous image. Perspective, a low or high view rather than at eye height. Monochrome instead of natural colour, or seeing a connection that others don't see. And so here's a fairly simple version of that from Bhutan a month or so ago, where we all walked past. There was a small group of us, we photographers, and a small group of us, and we all walked past this water coming out of a tap, I assume, somewhere there, and I took the photo because it looked like the tears of the Buddha. So that's me interpreting something. All right, now here's the next big issue to consider, I guess, and that is that all photography is autobiographical, and this is unavoidable. My photography reflects me. So, a few of the things: I'm male, I'm white, I'm from a Western culture, I'm an engineer, but I'm a sort of failed engineer because I got into traffic and road safety. So I've got to think about people, not just getting water to run downhill, despite the previous image. I'm eternally searching for connections that other people don't see. I'm a reformed or perhaps failed perfectionist, and on goes the list. And so this thing shows up in my photography. So others might go to New Orleans and take photos in Bourbon Street. What do? I go to New Orleans and I go around the suburbs and I take photos of traffic signs. So the one in the middle there with the duck crossing. So we've got a duck crossing, but it's within a school zone. So I call that ducks of the school. And then I've the image on the right's got some signs, and so I'm interpreting there. The signs are ancient. We've got rubbish there. We've got bad drainage, and it all. I'm trying to create an interpretation there of that location. All right, so if it's all autobiographical, what else can I say? Here's a few of my biases. And so my first bias is that it's all about composition, light, and the impact of the image. You know, not much else matters. I mean, getting the technical stuff right in the first place is highly important. But you know, once we move on from that, it's about these three things. So number 2 in my bias list is I cannot stand what I call baboons' bums. If anyone's ever been to East Africa on a safari and you try to take a photo of a baboon, they all walk away from you and all you get is these red backsides of baboons. And so what I mean by this is images of people with the backs of people rather than the front. So, you know, we've got a couple of images here, the top one in a market, and I don't know, it just seemed to be, you know, wherever I stood, all I was getting was the back of the people, and then the sheep joined in with their backsides as well. And the other image was at the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin, and there was a rally there. But the image is interesting enough, but it's just the backs of the people. So I don't. That's never going to be a winner, I don't think. All right. So number 3 is I can't stand voyeuristic images, and what I mean by that is images taken from the other side of the street. All right. So here's an image taken from the other side of the street on South Georgia Island, but you get the idea. So it's much better to engage with people and get in closer. So once you get some engagement, you're going to get a more interesting. And I think we saw that in the Brian. I hope it's Brian Houghton. Brian's winning images we just saw at the brick making place in Bangladesh, that he's got in and engaged with people. And so, you know, the closer you get in, the more you engage with people, the more likely you are to get that impactful image. And I would say to people, and probably for the people who are watching live here, it's not news, but you know, for people who are a bit reluctant to get in there and engage, I'd just say go to places where people like to be photographed, and Sri Lanka is definitely one. Bali is another place where they're almost begging you to take their photos. So it's good practice. All right, and the fourth of my biases, I can't stand feet that are chopped off at the ankles. So for me, it's a case of, you know, I need to see the feet all in there, or there's been some conscious decision to chop them off at the knees, as it were. But you know, the composition there doesn't look like oops, we just made a minor mistake. All right, so that's a few of my biases, and you don't need to know any more about me. But what this then leads to is the one big question in this whole topic. It is, do you travel to photograph, or do you photograph your travels? Because there's quite a distinction there. You know, if you travel to photograph, well, you are intending to photograph, you head off to somewhere, or even if you're heading off and something else is happening, but the times you're taking photographs, you've got the intention of, you know, this is looking like you know, something that's worth photographing. Or do you just go, oh well, I'm on holidays and I'll take some photographs of it? And I think you know, if you look at Travelog magazine, there's something of a split there. You know, some articles and their images are on one side of this, and then there's other ones that are on the other side. So as examples, on the left, I wrote an article about trying to get into the northwest angle in the USA on the Canada border, and basically I was photographing my travels. I was in faithful recording mode. But then other articles I've put in, I've travelled to photograph, and so some images here that I've taken and have appeared or will appear in Travelog. So it's quite a different approach to photography. And I suggest there's probably a parallel concept with this, and it is, would you put together a panel or a portfolio of images for ARPS or FRPS based on I photograph my travels? Well, of course not. That's not going to work. So what this means is the best travel images are art. They are interpretive, and again, think back to the brick factory images we just saw recently. There is an interpretation happening there with Brian's images. All right, but are all artistic images of travel legitimate travel images in terms of what we would like to see presented within the group? And I'll return to this question in a little while. But there's a second parallel concept, and I suppose it's the same or similar to whether you'd put together a panel for ARPS or FRPS, is would I hang on my wall an image that was I photograph my travels? And so I'd say I hope not, unless of course it's a family photo, and that's the intention of the photography. All right, so just looking at basics for a moment. What makes a strong image? And I guess the first thing is impact. It either tells a story or there's a connection between the people in the image. And we saw that we've seen that with some of the images this evening. There's a connection between the person in the image and the viewer, or it has a visual impact, and that usually happens with a simple composition. So it might tell a story, and you see this image, and you go, okay, well, I can work out a story from that. Mightn't be the real story, but there's a story, and you can relate to it. Or there's a connection between the people in the image here, and of course part of the story with this image is that one of the people isn't connecting, but there's something going on between the people in this image. Or there's a connection between the person in the photo and the viewer, which obviously starts out as the photographer, and so there can be strength in images from that. And then finally, in terms of impact, it can be one that has visual impact. And as I was saying, this usually happens with simple compositions. All right, what else makes a strong image, or helps makes a strong image? Interesting lighting. And so images here in Verona, and then one at Inle Lake in Myanmar. And so interesting light comes from dawn, dusk, or bad weather. So those of you in the UK would have plenty of opportunities for interesting light. So the third one, pleasing composition. And we've heard about composition in terms of the competition results tonight. And so, I always say, start with putting something on the thirds and then work your way away from it as you feel confident. So a pleasing composition is also going to add to it. But let's now return to what might make legitimate travel images. If art is an interpretation of reality, how far can the artistic side be pushed? Is it all right to stage a travel image, for example? So here's an image I took in Myanmar. I've been to Myanmar twice. The first time I went, a nun walked down these steps. Nothing set up. Only trouble was she was holding a phone. So got the photo, but I thought next time I went back, we could do a bit better. And so on the first day, I bought a red umbrella, and then those of us in the photo group, on this day, the organizer organised a monk to come with us, and so this image is basically is staged. We've provided the umbrella, we've provided the monk, we've instructed him to walk down this slowly or quickly or whatever it might be. And so is that all right to put in? And personally, I would never put that image in a travel composition because I know it is it's been set up or staged. But here in the travel distinction guide is this image, and the discussion for the image is about the lighting of it. There's no discussion about whether it actually should be in a travel portfolio. And I think, you know, to me, it looks like it's been set up. I've been to that location, and I've not seen young monks running up and down, you know, playing Batman. So it's, you know, this is a question of, you know, whether or not, a question in relation to the limits of how much you might push the artistic side of things. So here's, and on the same theme, here's a quite a famous image by Steve McCurry called Taj Mahal and Train, taken in 1983, and apparently, you know, he had enough money to get the train to you know, go backwards and forwards until he got just the right image. So does that make it a travel image? I don't think so. You know, that's just like using the world as a grand studio, isn't it? And here's a couple of images I took in Sri Lanka, and the one on the left, artistically, I really like it. The elephant with the trunk up, but that's been organised by her mahout, and you can't see the chains around her feet because she's standing in a sort of swampy area. But then on the right, this wasn't set up. This was just me anticipating this may well be what the elephant's going to do, and so I managed to capture the spray of the water, and the guy on the right was an added extra. Right, so, you know, to me, all those staged or set up images may be artistic and worthy of being hung on a wall, but in my view, they are not travel images because they are not truthful. All right, so that then gets us into the next can of worms. But what is truth? And I'd explain it this way, or in relation to what we're thinking about here. Most of life is boring or mundane. I mean, you know, we just fill up our lives with, you know, we just got to get stuff done, and so as a result, we romanticize parts of it. It might be the past, it might be other people's lives, it might be some special event, whatever it is. And so I take a photograph, I go over to Sri Lanka and take a photograph of the stilt fishermen on the south coast, and it looks fantastic. The only thing is they only fish there in a certain season, and that wasn't the season, and you pay the guys and they go and sit up on the stilts. And a great image, but you'd hardly call it a legitimate travel image. You know? And as Peter Walmsley put in his article, you know, we go to different places, and so that's the unfamiliar places. And of course, if it's unfamiliar, it's much easier to romanticise about life there. But it is a romanticised interpretation of the truth. And I guess, in effect, there is no absolute truth, even with a boring record shot. But a line does need to be drawn somewhere, from my perspective, and I think that line needs to be where it allows the viewer to make the interpretation, have their own responses, and it's not a manipulated image. So if it's an event, you know, whether it's a train going past or a person walking past, it shouldn't be staged or set up. Elements shouldn't be added or removed from the image. So where does that leave us? Well, what it leaves us with is our opportunities for interpretation, and it leaves us with timing, perspective, composition, and lighting, basically. And here's where those opportunities for art exist. All right, so here's some examples. So here's one I put in the monthly competition last year. So, the artistic side of it is the perspective from down low. The composition, hopefully, is pleasing there. Here's one from Cambodia that was in travel log. Now, it's obviously at an event, and the event has been staged for the people watching it. However, the photo wasn't staged. I was just taking photos as it proceeded. I didn't have the opportunity to say, "Oh no, can you just do that again with another bag of rice?" So what I'm then using is the timing in terms of actually when I take the photo, but also the shutter speed, and then the composition as well. So again, here's another one from the Kadragama festival in Sri Lanka, where the perspective is down low, the timing. I wanted to get a bit of the flair of the bottom of those costumes, and making sure I got a composition. And then finally, here's one you may have seen earlier in the evening, where we've got the perspective with the wide angle, the lighting, so getting there when the sunlight's coming through the windows from the left and lighting up in the distance, and then the composition where I've got those doorways lined up. So that's the opportunity for me to add some artistry to it. All right, so pulling all these things together, then what we've got is travel images that are not set up or staged. The elements aren't added or removed. So we've got an agreed level of truth there. And we go back to that idea of a sense of place. Strong image, what's that impact or lighting and composition? And then an artistic image it's about interpretation. So we can combine those, then I think we're on the way. All right, art. So in Digit, the magazine of the Digital Imaging Group, earlier this year, there was an interview with Stuart Graham, who's taken these gorgeous images on the coast. I think whether it's in Dorset or Devon, I can't recall, but in that area. And he said, I feel that my images are abstract and are not a representation of reality. Rather, it's reality filtered through my senses. And so from our perspective, that might be taken too far. But he also says, and that's important, as art is at its highest when not a precise depiction of reality, because then it wouldn't take the viewer elsewhere as they looked at the work. And he says, my stuff is certainly about more than what was actually going on at the time. And I think that's art enhanced by the craft of photography. So Stuart's taken this to a greater degree from his photographic interest, but I think there's a lot of opportunity in that for us in the travel, with interest in travel as well. And so, because if it's impossible to create a precise depiction of reality, because firstly, all photography is autobiographical, and secondly, if we travel to photograph, we are in interpretive mode when we capture images, then surely all travel photography must strive to be art. Otherwise, it's simply a record that has no impact or risks being that way. All right, so I just pulled out a couple of examples of what I think is art in travel photography. And of course, here's Brian Houghton's work here, which, to me, I just think is brilliant. We've got strong, simple compositions with impact, and they tell a story. So, and at the same time, it is art. Here's some other examples. Or in an article, Arabian Nights, Iraq, by Donatas Grecius, and many excellent images, including this one, which also won a prize. So we've got engaging images with impact that tell a story. And so, it's this that's creating the art. Now, Ansel Adams said, "There is nothing worse than a sharp image of a fuzzy concept. In other words, a perfect realization that has no impact and doesn't produce a response." So photography, with impact requires a solid basis of technical competence, all the stuff like exposure, depth of field, sharpness, etc., that we are all aware of. And of course, the aim with that is to get the best of our craft into our images. But it also requires a good knowledge of the subject. And again, with the prize-winning images we've seen this evening, I think you can see that. There's this sort of understanding of the subject happening, and so I've just used 3 examples here: landscape photography, visual art, and street photography. So if we're doing landscape photography, we've got to have some understanding of the landscape first of all, and then understand about creating depth in the image and understand light and things like this. So I was very lucky to, with this image in the Lofoten Islands in Norway, that I came across this bit of coast, and all the lines on the coast were pointing towards the mountain that had the light on it. So can't do better than that. Visual art so requires observational skills, looking for connections, looking for patterns, things like this. And so the people who are really good at that are going to have those skills. And street photography, we need an understanding of people and be able and have an empathy to connect and able to engage with dignity with them. So getting very close to the end here. Wrapping it up in terms of art and travel. If we are conscious that all photography is autobiographical, but we seek to maintain a level of truth in our photographic interpretations, that gives us scope to travel, to photograph, and to create art as we do that. And so my conclusion is that there's no conflict between travel photography and photography as art. Rather, if we want travel photography to have impact, it is vital that we approach our photography with the intention of creating art, combining those elements of what makes a good travel image, a strong image, and our interpretation. And I'll just finish with, before we have some discussion, finish with a few images of mine, and it might help some discussion as well of what I think involves some art in my travel photography. So this is in Aksu in Western China, and this policeman was standing rigidly still, and so I thought, oh well, let's get a bit of movement happening with the vehicles. There's a bit of a blurred theme in some of my images, you'll notice. Kiva in Uzbekistan, I was taking photographs in the evening along the street, and these 2 characters turned up. They'd apparently been in a pageant just around the corner, and then they stopped and had a bit of a chat with each other right in front of me. So I thought that was a bit of a win, because suddenly there's an interpretation there of something from ancient times with these two gentlemen before they walked off. I didn't set it up; they just happened to come along. The register in Samarkand, while everyone it wasn't a photography tour, but so while everybody else was off having dinner, I was getting photographs like this. And then we came back after dinner, and all the light had gone out of the sky, and everyone took their nighttime photographs and were very happy about it. But I knew there had been something better earlier on. Inlay Lake, a lot of photographs of the fishermen in Inlay Lake, and this poor chap, he was trying to fish, and then a couple of boatloads of photographers turn up and glide around him, taking photographs, and he basically took no notice of us whatsoever. But it was just that lucky coincidence of the light, the interesting patterns on the water, and also for me anticipating there'll be a certain point where I'll get the silhouette of him. The Wanaka tree on the South Island of New Zealand. So I think my interpretation is there were about 6 of us, not just individuals, there, and I was the only one with a polarizing filter. So far as I understand, I was the only one who got pink in the clouds that morning, but that's provides that interpretation. Nothing that artistic with this one, but in Melbourne, it's just the idea that you can walk past something 100 times, and then at some stage the light is going to be different, or something's going to strike with you and create something something that you hadn't seen before. Patterns on Garry or Fraser Island up in Queensland. Opportunity for patterns that are artistic. Similarly on the right. Patterns from a plane. If you can get a fly over Australia and it's not hazy, there's plenty of opportunities there. All right, the Holocaust Memorial in Berlin, fabulous place to go to get some artistic interpretations there. And I noticed other people have done similar but quite different similar things, but quite in different interpretations there. And I went back in the evening and again got something quite different. So nothing set up. This person happened to be walking through there and provided the opportunity to create what I thought was well, I quite enjoy as an artistic image. And here's then the last few. This was on a tour, not a photography tour, but everyone else was taking photographs from somewhere off on the left, and I thought, no, the sun, I need to be facing the sun because I could see all these horses were going to kick up dust, and so that allowed me to get that interpretation there. All right, Lincoln, just the... I think the interpretation with this one is from the black and white because of that fine filigree of stone, and that cathedral just looks absolutely wonderful. And I was lucky enough to get a bit of English weather with the clouds, so it just made that image perfect from my perspective. Matera, so in Italy. Again, it's a case of seeing this and then making an interpretation. And the colour version of this looked quite good, but the sepia one, to my mind, became or provided a more artistic image. And then finally, one of my own favourite images, whether anybody else likes it or not sure, but I've actually definitely do have this hanging on the wall, which is a sepia interpretation of someone walking across the Teak Bridge in the Ubin Bridge in Myanmar. So they're trying to sort of, I guess, illustrate the opportunities for creating art at the same time as creating travel photographs. So that is it. Thank you. And I look forward to the discussion and questions, and I will stop sharing.
Thanks, Rob. Lots there to think about. I'm sure there are comments. So first of all, thank you. I'm sure everybody echoes that. Points for discussion. Come on.
A fabulous presentation there. Really enjoyed that, Rob. Very thought-provoking, and I thought the fact you were sort of tying into Peter Walmsley's article I thought was interesting. I shall go back and have a look at that. But yeah, it's just travel to photograph, photograph to travel. I think the whole idea is comes together well, but great photograph, really nicely set out and presented. So many thanks, much appreciated.
Thanks, Justin.
Yeah, can I just say I really enjoyed that. I thought it was a fabulous presentation and quite sort of controversial in places. I suppose the one that worried me a bit when I was watching it is when you talked about do you take photos only either you travel to photograph or you photograph your travels? And I thought back, I thought, oh my God, maybe 90% of my what I thought were travel pictures were taken actually travels with my wife, who unfortunately died a year ago. But they were, they were taken because we both really enjoyed traveling. But I'd like to think that you can still approach travels that were set up because you're traveling, you could still approach that using your interpretive mode. In other words, particularly my wife actually helped me with that because she had a keen eye as well. And she agreed that we wanted to make our own sort of photo book. So she said, look, what we need is da, 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 da. So what I'm saying is I don't think I'm not sure that distinction really holds. I mean, I have done 3 trips what, John, your definition were, I get this all right. So on all these pills I've got, I'm afraid I've got real problems. But on the one that you what is it? The other one that you travel to photograph, right? So I had 3 trips which were definitely like that, without my wife and with a professional photographer. And obviously, I completely take your point there. Clearly you're there with other people trying to do that. But I would like to think that all the other trips I did, which were a lot, which were with my wife, I would like to think that I could still bring that same interpretive mode to, most of the shots I take, not all of them, because sometimes you'd say, right, I do want to just a record of this. But a lot of the time, most of the time, I was thinking, right, how can I get a really interesting, quote, artistic picture here? So I was a bit worried by that distinction. But having said all that, I thought the whole presentation was fascinating and some wonderful pictures and very thought-provoking, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Graham. Yes, look, to some extent it was controversial, and of course the secret that I didn't let out is that once you get to the stage that you're at in being able to take photographs which are art, it becomes like almost second nature. As you say, you go away on trips that aren't specifically about photography, and that you've got an eye for it, and you'll see things that other people won't see, and you'll come back with images that have a high level of art in them.
I often feel that half the battle is trying to get something that somebody else hasn't already got of somewhere that you go to, that whether it's home or away, just bringing that different eye to it. Peter, your hand's up.
Yeah, thanks, Cal. Hi, everybody. I am an interloper here, but as I've been referenced, I feel not an obligation to say something, but a willingness, certainly. It's a question, Rob. I'm really glad you raised this because it's a question I've been anguishing about actually for many months now, would you believe, if not years. Which comes first, the choice of destination or the photography? And I've come to the conclusion I'm not sure we need to be so binary about it.
Mm.
And
pretty much what Graham was saying, isn't it?
Yeah, perhaps. The reason is, well, just one point though, every location is somebody's local area.
Yeah.
So Tom Lloyd has put a comment in the chat that travel can include your local area. So I used to live in Bolton, and if I was to go out and photograph the textile mills in Bolton, which was about 300 meters down my street, would that count as travel? And I've come to the conclusion that the thing which distinguishes it is that you need to have a sense of what that sense of place is, to understand the history and everything that the RPS says is a component of travel photography. Quite often, and the reason I push back on some of the statements that if you go down to the bottom of your garden and take a photograph, it's still travel photography. I do disagree. And Rob, you pulled out my key comment that it has to be unfamiliar to provoke the interest in the subject. And if somebody lives in Agra and goes out and takes the Taj Mahal, I think 9 times out of 10, they're taking it because it's just an iconic building on their doorstep. Whereas if you've gone to the trouble of understanding how it was built and why it was built, you're building that into the sense of story that as travel becomes an essential component to that. So whether or not you choose the destination or the photography comes first, I think the two things can work in parallel. It'll come together. But as long as you are interpreting it with a sense of curiosity, and therefore I come to the conclusion that we are travelers first and photographers second. And there's a contentious statement.
Can I say I agree, I think, with Peter on that, because it strikes me that some of my best travel work has been first visits to places. If I go back, it's never the same.
Yeah.
And it's almost like I capture the sense of awe that I had in going to that place. And once you go back, you've lost that. And then it just becomes another place. So I think, you know, there is that dimension that if you go on the bottom of your garden, so to speak, it's not the same because it's such a familiar place. And because it's familiar, you're not seeing it as a traveler would see it. But on the other hand, Kath, you made a comment in the very earlier part of the meeting about applying the traveler's eye, or travel photographer's eye. And I think that's another aspect of it I hadn't thought about, but I can see where you're coming from. But I do feel you need to be somewhere that you've traveled to, for heaven's sake. It is travel photography.
I think what I get to there, Richard, is that sometimes I walk out here and I think there's nothing here to take a photograph of as a traveller. If I were a traveller here, what would I take? And on my Namibia trip in November, I've got some photographs that are very like Rob's, but I've actually got some that are images I've never seen of Namibia before. And I was deliberately trying to get different shots, get something that I hadn't seen. And I think that's something we can do wherever we are, even if it's a place we've been to 1,000 times before. But it's difficult. I don't say it's easy.
Yeah.
Let's try and bring Peter in. Come in, Peter. What would you like to say?
Oh, hello. Oh, yeah. So, very interesting talk, Rob. Thanks. I suppose that I just like your comment on this. So, from what I gathered from your talk, you feel that maybe composition and geometry, lighting and exposure, and feeling rather than documentary is what makes a photograph into art. But I just wonder.
Can you just angle your camera a little bit so that we can see you? Turn that way.
Okay, sorry.
That's good.
I just wonder, so like you talked a bit about the history of photography, and I just wonder, in modern photography, such as in the old analog era, you could say all the interpretation art was in the photograph itself. But I just wonder, in digital photography era, how much do you think maybe this making it into an artwork or interpretation is also sorry, let me rephrase it. How much do you think maybe the art and the interpretation comes from the post-processing of the actual photograph rather than from the actual like physical taking of it?
Yeah.
I think these days a lot will come from that. But I think it for me, it's. I just recall the comments from Ansel Adams about all the dodging and burning he'd do to get you to look at the part of the image he wanted you to look at, and I think it's just these days we've got more opportunities to do dodging and burning and a few other similar elements. And another one of my biases I forgot to mention, is I prefer to have vertical parts of structures vertical. And these days I don't have to go out and buy one of those expensive lenses that does that. I can just play around with it in Photoshop and get things straightened up. So so there's certainly more opportunities for doing those sorts of things these days than there used to be.
Can I do another supplementary there? And I'll bring you in half a second, Marilyn. It's just I noticed those 2 images you showed of the Italian farm, and I had exactly the same thought. How much of that was post-processing and how much was the original photograph?
Oh, okay. No, I took that in 2008, so I wouldn't have been doing a great deal of post-processing with that one. Actually, I can post-process things to within an inch of their lives these days, but not in those days. But I think I was keener with that one. Well, I actually got it one day, and it was very ordinary. So then it was the second day I got that image. So there wasn't actually any mist at all in those little zigzaggy valleys the first time. But then the other thing is I've decided that the image without the horizon is a much more interesting image. Gorgeous pink sky, but then when I looked at it, no. So there wasn't a great deal of post-processing in that one, actually.
Marilyn,
thank you. I agree and disagree to an extent with what has been said about going and getting the sudden excitement and a view of a new place. But I do think that places do benefit from revisiting. I've been up to Darjeeling in the Himalayas many times, and I think what I see now is much more about the rhythms of the place. And if you're talking about achieving a sense of place, you're going to achieve a different sense of place, I think, if you know a place well and can capture the people, the times, the different rhythms of how a place works, than if you go sudden and do a sudden quick visit. I'm sure everybody gets wonderful visits on quick visits, because I do think the impact of a place is very important when you first see it. But I don't think we should dismiss actually going back and getting to know places over a number of years, maybe.
I think there's a lot to be said for that. Edgar, and then Patricia.
I really enjoyed the presentation, and I smiled very quietly when you were saying that you're an engineer and got involved with road safety and traffic management, which is part of my background. I do look at signs, but I've decided I shall never take signs. I think I'd had enough of them at the time. But when somebody was talking and you were talking about the awe of getting to a place and seeing it for the very, very first time. I saw the Taj Mahal about 6, 8 weeks ago for the very first time, and I was absolutely struck by it. I took a photograph, which I'm sure millions of people have got exactly the photographs, but I wanted to capture what I wanted to capture then, and I was so pleased with it. I felt almost emotional about it, and I thought that has worked for me, but I'm sure it's not travel. I'm sure it's not a sense of place.
I'm glad your India trip was a success, Ed. We heard about that before you went, didn't we?
Yes,
Tricia.
and I listened to some of the comments before I went over, and there was a gentleman did say that he'd enjoyed photographing a wedding and tried to find as many weddings as he could on the way through his India trip. And I did see one wedding, but it was not the actual ceremony part of it. It was the celebrational bit, and I thought, yeah, but I can't be in the right place, and I don't understand enough about it to take what I wanted to take. So I left that one. But no, I really enjoyed that presentation. I'd love to go back now and in another couple of nights watch it again from a YouTube if it was possible, because I think I'd want to take in more than I saw.
Yeah.
And I was able to process just in that one short period. There was so much you covered, really good.
Patricia and then Margaret.
Hi, thanks, Rob. That was such an interesting presentation, and I'm really loving the discussion that's happening now. I took a trip to Belfast recently, which is only 10 miles up the road from me. I went to a part of East Belfast and thought that I would, spend some time trying to photograph around some of the interface areas that I'm not massively familiar with. I normally stay on the bus and go straight into town rather than getting off there. But I really massively struggled, I think, to actually make any sort of creative connection. And it sort of has made me wonder whether sometimes we have a bit of a bias when it comes to photographing places sometimes that are close to us versus places that are abroad, that I think we sometimes maybe overlook or undervalue what's familiar. Whereas if I'd maybe been in a similar sort of part of a city in another country, would I have actually been a lot more inspired, or would I have seen things differently? Was it just that although I was in an area of Belfast that I'm not massively familiar with, I think it was still slightly too familiar for me to be really, really creatively engaged.
And yet this is a woman that got her ARPS with local photographs.
So I was supposed to completely contradict myself then as well, because
absolutely
gave my ARPS in Bangor, which is 5 miles away from where I live. And I think because of my repeat visiting, and even though it was local and familiar, it got me more excited the more frequently I visited, because it was making me look at that place more. So I'm just I think I've got more questions than answers to what I've just said.
Yeah, but I think it also has to do with making a connection with a place, doesn't it? And sometimes I say to myself, "Oh, I'm on a roll today." It's like I'm making connections. I'm seeing this image in my head. I'm seeing that, and things like that. And it sort of harks back to Graham's comment about whether you actually need to set out to with the intention of photographing, where when you're traveling. But I think that a lot of it is about being able to connect with a place, and if it's too familiar, maybe it's a bit hard to actually connect in a new way that might inspire you. Whereas, seeing something new or unfamiliar actually just gives you the space to connect those bits of yourself, I think, to what you're seeing. And also, I think, I remember. And you're saying my copy of Travelog hasn't arrived yet, but there's images I took in Sri Lanka at the Kataragama Festival, and I was sort of there, and it's like, okay, now what are the opportunities and what's happening here? And it took me a while to just sort of settle into the place.
Yeah.
And then I found these, we were standing beside all these people, and I found these people would be coming along in the parade and stare at me. And it's like, as I say, go to Sri Lanka if you got trouble with relating to people and taking photographs, because these people in the parade would just, they'd whiz around and then they stare, and it's like, please take my photograph. It's like I was on a winner. And so if you can, and in fact, in that case, it was those people helping me make the connection with what I was seeing. So I think it is making that being able to sort of see something in a sufficiently different or connected light that allows you to do it, I think.
Let's bring Margaret in. You had your hand up, Margaret, before.
Yes, sorry, I was just working out how to
unmute
to turn on the audio. Yes, thank you very much, Robert. That was very interesting and sort of a lot to think about. I was thinking holidays and things I've been on. I've been on a few photographic ones, including with Paul, and thoroughly enjoyed it in small groups. Another lot of holidays I've been a lot is safari holidays in Africa, because I've got friends on the Gold Coast in Australia who specialise in personalised safari holidays to Africa, and so they have to go and look at these places. So I go along too, and you'll have sort of 3 weeks, which is pure safari, and that's all wildlife. And I don't tend to put that in for anything travel. But the other one I go to quite a bit is the Gambia, because I'm involved in sort of a small voluntary organisation that sponsors children and young people for their education. And so I've got to know quite a few people there and things like that. And photographing there, I sort of know the place, but a lot of it is not, what I'm doing is I'm not photographing. But if I walk into the nursery school there are sort of screams of recognition, and the teachers come out, and then the kids come out at break, and a lot of them sort of come up, I'll take my photograph and that. But then they ignore me, and then I can get some quite nice ones of them.
Yeah.
But the other place, which is fascinating, is the markets, and that is very difficult, because there are some people there who really want their photographs taken, and will hold up a fish saying, "Take a photograph of me with the fish," and then there are others who don't want you anywhere near them with a camera, and trying to separate the two, and getting some interaction from the people. I mean, there's one guy I've photographed a few times who's got quite an interesting looking stall, and I took him first. He wasn't looking at me. He was serving a customer who got her back to me, and she was just getting her money out, and he could see me, but he was concentrating on her. And then as soon as she went, he went, "Hey," and I got another photograph of him, which he was really pleased about. But it's no good as a travel photograph, because it's all. So it's trying to get the balance between the two there can be really quite difficult. But anyway, it's given me quite a lot to think about, Rob. So thank you very much.
Good.
Peter.
Yeah, just a quick one. At the risk of putting Paul on the spot, who goes to places as on a number of occasions as his day job almost. Really interested to hear your thoughts on this, Paul.
Right. So I was going to interject. So for me, there's absolutely no doubt in my own photography that my better photographs will come on a return visit. And I see that with my clients and with all travellers. You enter somewhere amazing like the Taj Mahal compound, and you are just so completely overwhelmed by seeing it and photographing it. You charge around trying to find the best angles. Return visits are very different. You just overcome that adrenaline, and you can spend much more time, and that's where I feel my own photography leads to better results. More patience to sit for the right thing to happen in front of you. I did like Rob's overriding question there about travel for photography or photographing your travels. And I don't think it's that simple for me. I think I'd choose destinations where I think there will be good photo opportunities. But basically, when you're there, photography is almost secondary. I love the interactions that we get with people around the world. I love seeing other societies, and often it's not mattering to me if I'm coming away with particularly fantastic images. I also am not sure we need to consider travel photography in that as artistic photography. I mean, I travel with that as my sole photographic aim, really, is to record an impression of a location through longer shutter speeds, multiple exposures, ICMs, whatever it might be. But then the winning image in this year's competition by Brian, 3 beautiful documentary images of those brickworks. I don't consider those as art as such, but so I'm not sure we have to be thinking of art as being a definition within travel photography. And and my often repeated point is agreeing with Peter. I can't see travel photography beginning down my street in the UK.
Despite the fact that he lives in Dorset.
Yeah, I've always said I can walk out of the door here and I can go and take landscape photography, seascapes, street photography, all sorts of different genre, but that's what I consider them. I don't consider them as being travel photography. I'm not so stressed about it as not to appreciate the RPS definition. And something RPS gave me was there's no better definition of travel photography than that aim of capturing the essence of a place, the sense of a place. I mean, that's got to be the top of my reasons for admiring travel photography.
If you want to see more of Paul's photography, the talk that he did in the very early days of our Zoom sessions is on YouTube, and you can link it through the past or recent events, it still is called, card on the RPS Travel webpage. There are quite a lot of talks on there, but Paul's is there with some of my favourites of his shots, but then I have a few. So. Anything else? Anybody else feel like coming in on this? Edgar.
Only a very quick one. We had some visitors come to stay who'd never been to South Wales or to Cardiff ever before, and they were with us for something like 3 or 4 days, and we took them to different places, and I was really fascinated by the fact they were photographers that they were looking at things that I wasn't looking at, and they were taking photograph things that I wasn't doing, whether they were just casual holiday snaps for them, or whether they were looking at it with a different eye to me. Made me think quite a bit, that did.
Yeah, interesting, Edgar. I've got friends in the Vale, and I come down there maybe once, twice a year, but I haven't been into Cardiff for a long time. And having been a student in Cardiff in the 60s, I've never been to the Bay Area since it's been redeveloped. And I keep saying sometime when I come down, we really must go in because I'd really like to get the camera there. Just because I've never seen it. It'd be interesting to see how going to a city that I used to know quite well, but to an area that is totally changed, how my eye would come into operation and whether I would get some photographs worth having or not.
Happy to accompany you on your trip around Cardiff.
Thanks, Edgar. I might take you up on that. Anything else? Okay. Well, let's wind it up there and say many, many thanks, Rob. Thank you for promoting discussion as well, because I think that's really been useful and something we don't always manage, even though we try.